Welcome to our review time as we seek to solidify what we read this past week and as we also seek to put it back into its meta-narrative. Now, we have a lot of immersing ourselves in the writings of King Solomon. He wrote the book of Proverbs, which we dived into last week. And today, as we look at and review, we looked at the Song of Solomon and Ecclesiastes. So what I want to do is just go back to the Song of Solomon and make a couple of comments that I think that might be helpful. I know that there have been a number of books that have been written about the Song of Solomon. It seems like oftentimes that people focus on the sexual imagery, the metaphors, and all that. And in fact, back in the days, early days of reading Hebrew scriptures, that men who were under the age of 30 were not allowed to read the book of the Song of Solomon because the fear of that it would stimulate them and disturb them, and they would act unrighteously to act out on those sexual desires. But the Song of Solomon actually tells the story about an unnamed woman, the Shulamite woman, and she has genuine longings. The story begins with, oh, well, let him kiss him with the kisses. And as I think about the Song of Solomon, she wasn't just thinking about the low-down guy who's showing his crack and drinking a beer on the weekend. No, she set her heart and her mind on the king. So what you see here is the deep longing of every single person is to have a relationship with the sovereign king. We don't set our sights so low, just anybody who would have us. We really want to be wanted by someone of importance. And I think that kind of gives us an idea and understanding of why the Song of Solomon often has been interpreted that it's God's relationship with Israel, that it's Jesus' relationship with the church. And it's for me as an individual, I genuinely want to be longed for, desired, and wanted by a king. Not only that, is there in the story of the Song of Solomon, you have two different times where she's there by herself and the king comes to visit with her. And on the first occasion, he knocks on the door and she's like, no, not right now. Just give me a little bit of time. And so he disappears. And then she immediately comes to her senses, goes out and finds him and brings him in. The second occurs in chapter 5. And this time he comes to visit her. He knocks on the door and she is like living in a bubble bath. I mean, she's just like Mars dripping from her hands and so on. She is enjoying all the pleasures of palace life. She has become so enthralled with the benefits of being in the kingdom, in the palace, that she no longer desires the king himself. So what happens? He goes away. And she comes to her senses, what have I done? And she goes and runs after him, and she can't find him. So she goes to the daughters of Jerusalem, and she asks them, where's the king? Have you seen him, the one whom I love? So what happens is she comes to her senses, and then he returns, and you have a happy ending there in the Song of Solomon. So what I see in this picture, yes, is a picture of what Solomon probably felt like as he perhaps wrote this drama to be played out in Israel, that our hearts are prone to wonder, that we will leave that king, the one who desires to have a relationship with us. Because even his father recognized that he was a king, but he was subject to the creator of the universe, the king of all kings. And I think what happens here is Solomon has forgotten that he is a subject to a greater king, a greater kingdom, the one who longs to have a relationship with him, but he gets so sidetracked with building his own kingdom that his heart departs from the Lord. Just something to think about as you read the Song of Solomon, as you think about it in review this week. And another thing that you see here is he writes the book of Ecclesiastes. And many theologians believe that this is towards the end of his life, and he's looking back on his life and thinking, I have wasted my life. Why? On pleasure that's empty, eating and partying and all those things, thinking that he would somehow find pleasure in those things. But no, there's nothing that offer genuine pleasure this side of heaven. So what you have him expressing the deep regrets of his life at the closure of Ecclesiastes. And this is found in chapter 12, where he makes this statement. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. So what happens here is Solomon's life, the way he began with seeking wisdom, it ends with the acknowledgement that he did not live his life well. So it begins with wisdom and it ends with wisdom saying, hey, you know what? If I could do a redo, if I could do it all over again, this is my statement for you. Fear God and keep his commandments. And so what happens after he dies, the kingdom divides. And we see that the lack of wisdom is passed on to the next generation because his own son acts out of extreme foolishness. And as a result of that, the kingdom divides. So as we move into that this next week, I want you to think about how people need wisdom and how the lack of wisdom sets a person up for moral failure, for spiritual failure. But deeper and more than that, he loses his life purpose. And his life is determined by the amount of wisdom that he secures from the living God. We need God's wisdom from the time we're born to the time we die. And we don't need to take a staycation from God in the midst of our lives. We need to stay with seeking God's wisdom all the days of our lives. Amen?